Hi, my name is Ophi YouTube Videos. I am a feminist and a lesbian. I make conversational commentary videos about both of those things. And what if being gay was a norm and straight was illegal? I was talking to my friend Sad Fox recently about how frustrating we've been finding the recent discourse around Fletcher, which I spoke about in my recent video about biphobia. And Sad Fox made an excellent joke that people are acting as if the song Fletcher made was a world where being gay is a norm and straight was illegal HD, which A, is really funny, B, is how people are acting, and C, reminded me of how long this has been on my list of videos to make, and I kept forgetting about it. I've only known a world where being gay is a norm and straight is illegal HD as a meme, a screenshot that gets passed around on Tumblr to describe fictional universes like The Locked Tomb with primarily gay characters, or as a joking reaction to LGBTs stole the rainbow style straight conservatives who would worry about attacks on the nuclear family or whatever. I never actually looked into the video, but I did always laugh when the screenshot would pop back up. And, in a world where gay was a norm and straight was illegal HD, I might need to be a little bit less careful about my internet presence. But in this one, where I'm a lesbian who makes videos that piss people off, I do need to be careful, which is why I'd love to thank the sponsor of today's video, Aura. Even if you're not making people angry online like I do, you might be interested in this, because I'm sure I'm not the only one fielding scam voicemails or an inbox full of spam. They get full like this because of data brokers, companies that steal your data. They do it without your consent, and they make billions selling it to anyone who wants it. Marketers, scammers, even stalkers. And yeah, sure, they're legally required to take your information down from these shady people finder websites if you ask them to, but they make the process confusing and hard on purpose. Like I said, shady. When a weirdo found my prior legal name on one of those people finder sites and tried to scare me with it back before I had Aura, I had to make a whole account just to get them to take it down, which was so frustrating for me because I was giving them more of my information just to try to get them to keep some of it offline. And they did take it down for a while, but they stick that stuff right back up and wait for you to ask them to take it down over and over and over again. Which is why I recommend Aura to all my friends and everyone in the Nuance Corner. They take care of the hard part for me, making requests and automatically removing my information from websites I wouldn't even know to check for myself on, and then keeping it off. And Aura will help you with way more than just that. With Aura, you can get alerts if your personal information is found on the dark web. You'll also get real-time fraud alerts for credit and banking, 24/7 monitoring to help keep your identity secure, a secure VPN antivirus password manager, and more, with US-based support and fraud experts available around the clock, and up to $5 million in identity theft insurance protection. All of this in one app, every layer of protection. I've been using Aura for about 6 months now at this point, and I always say this because it's true. I feel much safer online knowing that I'm not the only one keeping an eye out for me. The internet is too big for me to keep an eye on alone, and that's why I choose Aura. You can choose Aura too and try it for free for 14 days at aura.com/ofidoki or by scanning the QR code on the screen right now. In those 2 weeks, you will discover where your data is being exposed and sold. I'm not leaving myself vulnerable, and you shouldn't either. Thank you so much to Aura for sponsoring this video and so many others on the channel. If only we could live in a world where data brokers were illegal and digital security was a norm. So I suppose a useful first piece of information for me to give you would be that a world where being gay is a norm and straight is illegal HD is not actually the short film's proper title. The short film is actually called Love Is All You Need, and it's also hosted on YouTube in multiple languages and different cuts. And none of the titles on those different cuts are A World Where Being Gay is a Norm and Straight is Illegal HD. This isn't the order Sad Fox and I came to this information in, though. I cleaned up the timeline a little bit for the sake of intrigue, so I could dare to ask the question, how did this end up on that particular YouTube channel, and who gave it that title, and why? A World Where Being Gay is a Norm and Straight is Illegal HD was uploaded by YouTube user Lauren Martins, who, as far as I can tell, had nothing to do with the creation of the short film. In fact, most of her YouTube uploads are about paragliding and falconry. There seems to be a documentary about Lauren in Portuguese about her paragliding and her seeking gender equality in paragliding. It is in Portuguese, however, so I did not ask my dear friend Sad Fox to translate more than just a tiny bit of it for me, because it's about an hour long. What I did ask Sad Fox to translate for me were some of the thumbnails for Lauren's other most popular videos, which include proof that the Bible lies and that God doesn't exist. Which, alright, Lauren's bio on her channel also mentions that she's an atheist. It's not totally jarring. I mean, at least not the way that the replacement theory videos on the channel are. There's racism in there. And that's when I really started spinning, because I had always just assumed that a world where being gay is a norm and straight is illegal HD is just what I would refer to as ally bait. A literal straight up public service announcement level, hey, straight people, what if you considered gay people were also human and that you wouldn't like to be treated the way that you treat them? And I don't think that that's a bad thing, I just never had any particular interest in watching it. But seeing it against the racist replacement theory videos, I had to suddenly try to recontextualize it. Had I been wrong? Was the intention of a world where being gay is a norm and straight is illegal HD actually just straightforward execution of that concept? Was this Daily Wire style propaganda and I had assumed positive intent about something that didn't deserve it? Why was this posted? Why did the OP call it that? I can only answer a few of those questions. I can tell you up front that some of the mystery about why Lauren Martins uploaded the short film to YouTube and how she feels about it will remain. I assume that she's in agreement with it, though, because according to her social media posts, she appears to be a trans woman and also, like, generally pro-LGBT, just very, very racist in an atheist-motivated sort of way. And once I realized that, I shifted my focus very quickly over onto the short film itself, which I was right about. This is a PSA, one that was shown in schools, and apparently that some teachers came under fire for showing in their classrooms. And it's one that is, in its best of intentions, attempting to stand for gay rights, or really more so just against bullying. It does this in a few incredibly clumsy and telling ways, but I have to admit that I was relieved not to have been wrong. I was relieved to be faced with a flawed piece of media that does believe I should exist, rather than with a flawed piece of media that doesn't believe so. Earlier this week, I watched A World Where Being Gay is a Norm and Straight is Illegal HD on stream as a little Pride Month bonding activity. I actually watched a G-Reddit edit that was hosted on the director's channel. If you caught that stream already while it was going down or after, you already know a lot of what I think about this short film. I am baffled and confused and let down, but I find it fascinating in ways it doesn't intend to be. Let's talk about what it intended to be first, as far as I can gather from the interviews with the director on YouTube, which I hadn't seen yet at the time of watching it on the stream. Okay, here's the thing about this short film and its subsequent movie. The concept feels absurd, especially looking in from the outside as a gay person, as someone very familiar with how homophobia works and operates, as I assume most of us who are watching this video are. But the movie can also get really dark and upsetting in some of its themes. And so I'm going to tell you what the intention of this movie was, and we're actually not going to linger a ton on all of the details. I find the Wikipedia articles for both the short film and the movie pretty suitable if you need to know exactly what happens other than what I'm going to talk about, but I mostly want to talk about things in this movie that don't make sense. I want to talk about all of the unanswered questions that this movie raised for me. So take this as your trigger warning. If you want to skip all the references to bullying and suicide, you can jump to the next chapter, but I want this to be a somewhat light video despite the subject matter, so we won't be lingering on this topic for too long. The concept, despite being credited at the end of the movie like this for some reason, is really simple and obvious. What if straight love was treated the way gay love is? This is a story that was created to be the vessel for a message. The director, K. Rocco Shields, said as much outright in an interview I found that has audio that's too terrible for me to even screen record and share here. It's a video from 2011 when she said that the short film was inspired when everyone was in an uproar about teen bullying, and they still are, end quote. She goes on to explain that she thought, since nobody could seem to understand why these bullied children were dying by suicide, that maybe people could understand if the world was reversed. In Kim's own words, she said the movie is more about bullying than it is about setting up the frameworks of this gay world, if you will. But actually, Kim, I won't. I mean, I have to, because that's both the short film and the movie that ended up being made. A movie that is very much more a bullying story than it is a queer one. And to be honest, there are more interviews Kay gave for both the short film and the later movie adaptation, but I stopped feeling nearly as interested in hearing about them once I realized her larger focus was so much more on bullying than on gay issues, and that I wouldn't get my answers for my many, many questions about this gay alternate universe. In that short film we watched on stream, we see the young girl be bullied by her peers and classmates before she eventually attempts to die by suicide. The short film ends ambiguously, with her mother's kicking down the door, and in the full movie she survives, but it is a very upsetting scene to watch, as are many of the bullying scenes in this film, particularly with this little girl character. And she's being bullied because, as mentioned, she lives in a world where being gay is a norm and straight is illegal HD, and because she is a closeted heterosexual. A shitty trick that I think this movie pulls is that it uses ro, as in short for hetero, throughout, and even breeder, which we'll get to why breeder makes no sense, but that's a later point. For most of the film, it lets us acclimate to these made up slurs for this production of oppression. And then, in the very most visceral and upsetting scenes in both the movie and the short film, they suddenly switch to actual used slurs for gay people, actual homophobic language. And I understand it on the one hand, at least in terms of how that has the greatest emotional impact, but it does muddy the metaphor, and it's already an extremely, extremely clumsy and weird metaphor, which is what I feel like talking about more than the parts that were viscerally upsetting to watch. So the movie version adds two more plots besides the young girl we met in the short film, and the cast is weirdly stacked for what this is. I mean, I guess stacked is generous. I just recognize a lot of people, like Lily from Hannah Montana, the tech bro boyfriend from Pretty Little Liars, the sister from Ugly Betty, Alice from The L Word plays a really mean coach. Elton from Clueless is there. He plays the teacher who wants to put on a gender swapped to straight version of Romeo and Juliet, because in this universe it was originally published about two men, and the little girl is going to be in it. This was in the short film as well, but it is expanded upon in the movie. A bunch of the extended runtime, 2 hours worth, is taken up playing out a love story between a girl football player named Jude and a boy who's into sports journalism named Ryan. They fall in love, but they're outed, and the guy from Pretty Little Liars, that's who plays Ryan, is murdered in a heterophobic hate crime on the same night as the football player girlfriend is brutally beaten on the field of the football game in a heterophobic hate crime. The guys who murder the guy from Pretty Little Liars film it for some reason, and it ends up going online, which means not only the little girl sees it, but also that's kind of what plot 3 is this bigoted lady preacher who stokes hatred and violence against heterosexuals, actively sends her congregation out to kill them, and ends the movie in prison for being an accessory to a hate crime. Did you get all that? I feel like you might still have some questions, right? Because I certainly do. But the movie was about bullying, and so it's not really about answering questions. It's actually more about how, the little girl was being bullied, and bullying is bad. Also, there's another plot where the guy from Pretty Little Liars is pledging for a fraternity and being hazed. And also, Jude's girlfriend, Lily from Hannah Montana, is running for homecoming queen, which I thought was only a high school thing, but also I was homeschooled. I don't know. What do I know? I just know it was hard for me to remember that half of this was taking place in junior high and half of it was in college and not like middle school and high school. Anyway, rather than going beat for beat on a 2 hour long PSA, I thought I would do the opposite of what Kay wanted to do and try to figure out what on earth the frameworks are of this gay world. Why are the girls playing football exactly? This was a weird part in the short film as well, even before there was a main character who's a girl football player. I think it's a weird gesture toward trying to do some sort of gender reversal thing. There are a few men who are also portrayed as being more nurturing and caring, but there doesn't seem to be much larger thought behind girls play sports now. It's not really carried through. It's like a weird High School Musical plus gender binary. Theater is for boys, football is for girls. There are no cheerleaders at all, even though it should have been boy cheerleaders, right? But I guess it's not because sports are just for girls in gay world. Except that the girls' college football team has a dude coaching it, so I guess football isn't only for girls. It just doesn't make a ton of sense, which leads me into my next point. How come nobody looks gay even though everybody is supposed to be gay? This one's more of a funny gripe than anything, and also, honestly, if the gay characters looked visibly queer, I might be genuinely offended. I don't quite have an issue with this, but I do think it's an interesting and telling thing about both the short film and the movie. As the movie is now, it's fairly easy to forget that queer people are acting as the oppressors because everybody's the most boring, beige, khaki ass motherfucker you've ever seen. There are no trans people, there are no butches, there are no femmes. For that matter, I think there's not even any bisexuality in this universe. It's certainly not mentioned. It's forgotten, just like they forgot to do any analysis of race. I don't know that forgotten is the right word, actually, having done just a tiny bit more research. Here's an interview I found with the director, which you can find linked in the description below. Love is All You Need is a universally relatable story, said Shields. I originally considered using inversion approaches founded on race, religion, and appearance. I decided the lens of sexuality works best in speaking to intolerance for this story, because love is universally important, honorable, and especially pure from a child's point of view. The film is built so that the viewer can easily connect with our leads' perspectives and empathize with their painful experiences of being bullied for being different. I chose the setting for Love is All You Need carefully, said Shields. I very much wanted to avoid creating a stereotypical gay world full of effeminate men and masculine women. The movie takes place in an everyday American town where the church and college football team play big roles in local culture. I simply switched the predominance of sexualities so that homosexuality was the norm and heterosexuality was the minority. This isn't a movie about queer issues filtered for straight people. It's a movie for straight people filtered through the queer experience. And I guess this is a mixed bag. I would be much crueler to this movie if the characters did look queer. But also, I think it's funny that everyone looks exactly like how a heterosexual parent would be dressed on an MTV show in Gay World. It's actually not just a world where being gay is a norm and straight is illegal HD, it's also actually super Christo-fascist. I do need to give it credit that by right of only showing us stories closely affiliated with the church, it might have been over-exaggerating the role of the church in this society, but the reverend lady who runs the church is responsible for all of the heterophobia and for running the entire town, apparently. She has the superintendent so in her pocket that she can force that teacher who wants to do straight Romeo and Juliet to quit. But even outside of her apparent control over the politics of the town and the school board, every house we see seems to have crosses. Most people, I think almost everybody, is wearing a cross necklace. And I find this interesting, but unfortunately, because the movie itself isn't interested in actually exploring its own framework, there's genuinely no way for me to tell just how big of an impact this pastor is having on the broader world, or if this is just a really fucked up small town. I don't understand how much is solved when the pastor goes to jail because the movie doesn't care to tell me. It also doesn't care to tell me how come the reverend is a woman but God is still a man. Like, why didn't we commit to woman God? Did we think that would be the thing to break immersion, but we could handle gay oppressors? This might be because I have Mandela affected myself into believing the YouTube title was A World Where Being Gay is a Norm and Straight is Illegal when it's really straight is a minority, but I can't tell how illegal being straight is. I'm pretty sure that you can't get married, but you can be straight, like legally? The sister from Ugly Betty runs a heterosexual alliance at Jude's college and has an entire computer lab for it for some reason. And there's a fancy glass door with a sticker on it, and it doesn't get smashed at all. But also, we saw all the straight kids getting, bullied and hate crimed, so I don't understand why the heterosexual alliance got left alone. Again, with not being able to tell how huge the influence of the church is on this universe, are we meant to understand that this Westboro Baptist Church pastiche is completely controlling at least local elections? Because that would tell me it's probably just not legal to be married, but that they would be trying to criminalize it. Which would tell me that the straight alliance should have been some kind of underground thing, especially even if just being outed was that dangerous. But the lady running that is left completely alone, despite other straight people having their lives in danger for being straight. Maybe because it's like an it gets better thing and she was the only straight adult? I don't know. And speaking of the baffling way that they were handling straight adults in this movie, how the fuck are you gonna write a world with such a thing as breeding season but refuse to acknowledge misogyny? Despite the mostly half-assed gender role reversals in this universe, the films don't at any point take misogyny specifically into consideration. which is a really strange thing in a world where breeder is a slur. I feel like in this particular alternate gay universe, IVF would be the norm. Again, this movie seems to have forgotten that trans couples exist and that there are some gay couples that could, in fact, conceive outside of breeding season. So instead, there's a set period of time where men and women agree to have sex for purely procreational purposes every year, which I guess means everyone's birthday is around the same time, and you would be immediately outed for having straight parents if you had been conceived outside of breeding season. But somehow there is a breeding season. There is a season of time referred to as breeding season, and there's not misogyny? How? All right, my Arrested Development footage not found is a stretch, but barely. There's no breeding season plotline. It just comes up twice, both times just in dialogue. One of those times is a conversation with two dads and their children, where it goes like,
you know how during the breeding, the periods, breeding periods, when a couple agrees on having a child, they, well, in order to have the kid, they go to a woman and a man.
Gross.
Yeah, well, you know what? That's the right idea, son.
And I thought this was going to be all we would get in terms of breeding season details, and I was devastated for it to be tossed out just for a birds and bees type of vague, unfinished explanation. Especially because I think the two dads are probably the most interesting perspective on this, since neither of them carried, and how'd they end up with two kids. But later, during a speech from the Reverend, she gives us a little tiny bit more. And also, as I was rewatching, I noticed this sermon, she does mention pride parades and protests for equality. So, despite my earlier confusion, I guess it's not illegal to be heterosexual. So, Reverend Rachel says,
Men and women are equal in God's eyes, but should live separately in same sex unions, where the most sacred of brotherly and sisterly love can bloom, as is his design. They will work together in humble donation during the breeding season, so new sons and daughters can be brought forth to carry God's holy and very beautiful and blessed message. We shall not subject ourselves to the breeding tendencies of animals who show no restraint.
What? Huh? I'm thrown by that brotherly and sisterly love thing. Do they mean inside of the couplings of wives and husbands, or do they mean brotherly and sisterly love as men and women who are friends with each other outside of their marriages? Is this gay world also celibate? Because this is the only line that really points to that, but we do see multiple sets of women kiss each other like they might catch something, so I don't think all the gay people are expected to be celibate. However, this line feels like it might kind of imply it there somehow, and I know that there's nothing deeper to be found because the movie refuses to grant me that. But what a missed opportunity. What a clear lack of vision to have breeding season with no analysis of misogyny or larger gender analysis at all that would allow that to actually be saying anything. It's so genuinely absurd, and a lot of the movie is, but this is really the part that takes the cake for me. Not to say that I wish that this was Omegaverse instead, but I wish the whole movie had been about breeding season, kind of. Look, I know a lot of these are pretty seemingly silly gripes, and I've skipped over a lot of the more serious things in the film in order to keep this video on the lighter side. But I think the things that I did decide to talk about actually come together to serve a larger criticism of this film, one that could be made on the short we watched on stream as well, its complete lack of intersectionality. The issue isn't exactly just that this movie wants to talk to straight people and try to get them to understand us. It's okay if that's the kind of art people want to make. It's just that what ended up being made is such a confused and strange movie that borrows its emotional weight from real life tragedy and emotionally manipulates the people who already agree with it while probably seeming ridiculously dramatic and safely far away from the actual behavior of anybody who's thoughtlessly homophobic but willing to go see a movie about how gay people should have rights. And that's fine, but I think it's not particularly effective as a piece of art. I believe that the director of Love Is All You Need not only intended to change minds with her movie, but genuinely believed that that was possible. And while I think a lot of things have changed people's minds, even probably just characters on TV shows, I can't imagine who would be watching this who wasn't already knowingly an ally. With the exception of like kids in schools who, from my comment section, it seems like we're already in the gay straight alliance when they were shown this. I can't imagine who would be watching this and wasn't already an ally. And I feel like it would be hard to watch even as an ally because it was honestly hard to watch as a gay person. That's why I put the trigger warning up front. If I hadn't been watching the movie with my friend Allie, I think I would have bailed. It ended up being extremely intense, even more so than the short film, I feel like. But also, I watched the short film on 1.25 speed with my really lovely and funny chat cracking me up the whole time, so that also might be why I wasn't as impacted by the short film. What Love Is All You Need strikes me as more than anything is the same love era of gay rights organizing, when all that felt like could be asked of our would be allies would be that they understand that we experience love in the same way that they do. And on many fronts, I'm on board with this, or at least I want to be. Yeah, I do think it would be awesome if all straight people understood my relationships with women are as meaningful and serious and worthwhile as their relationships with the perceived opposite gender are. But the same love style rhetoric is also just not enough. It's not impossible for me to understand how the director came to the idea or the concept, whichever she's credited for. However, she thought that this movie might make a difference. And maybe I'm just extremely cynical and it truly did make a difference. I mean, the Wikipedia pages boast comments of people claiming to have been forever changed by this movie. This director is also in a long-term relationship with a woman herself. And I understand her impulse to try to sort of humanize our struggle, for lack of better phrasing. I just don't agree that that's all we get to ask for. Human rights needn't be dependent on one's relatability or ability to perform a type of love that somebody finds valid. I shouldn't have to ask to be tolerated. I shouldn't have to ask for people to try to put themselves in my shoes and see how they might feel. And if maybe a really, really, really emotionally manipulative movie would help them to see that. And if I'm not going to be doing any of that, the thing that I'm presenting to the people I'm asking for a better world from shouldn't be as unambitious as maybe don't kill us, please, or as unintersectional as let's just put all the white gays on top and call it good. And I know that it would be good if this is what society was like, is very much not the moral at all of Love Is All You Need. The director is showing the ways that it could be bad. This is a PSA and a cautionary tale for unaware heterosexuals who are open enough to gay rights to watch the movie in the first place. And I know that I'm overanalyzing it. I know that I'm asking for it to just be a different movie than it is, but it would be nice to be able to imagine a more hopeful version of this, wouldn't it? And that's what the gay liberation struggle is about, especially when we don't let it get bogged down in petty infighting that nobody should have time for. It should be an intersectional struggle that asks for more than just to be tolerated, and at least attempts to promise a better world for coming with it. One that takes into account things like race and gender and class and actually attempts for something more equitable. And how pie in the sky it even feels to be saying all of this right now when we are all feeling so powerless and so much is happening. If I knew how to get anywhere near that brighter future, I would tell you. But the only thing I know how to do right now is try not to let myself act like it could never come. The director of this PSA turned film might not have been interested in the intersectionality or in the actual building of a world where being gay is a norm, but I think we can be. And I think we have to be if we ever want to get anywhere in this world. Again, this is where I'm speaking more about us than about what I truly expect out of a movie, but it did feel like a good illustrative example, as one of you pointed out in the comments on the video on demand for the live. You cannot meaningfully combat homophobia by making it something as universal as a story about bullying, and you cannot address homophobia without being intersectional, which means also taking on racism, transphobia, ableism, misogyny, and classism. It's all an interconnected struggle, and to leave pieces behind is to do a job so bad it raises more questions than it actually needed to answer in the first place. Although the full length movie version did answer a couple of questions about Shakespeare's secret in world heterosexuality, I guess that was worth thinking about once it was a full length movie, but not why there's a breeding season and not a turkey baster season. I don't know. Thank you so much for watching. Please let me know if you enjoy this kind of over-analysis video from me and if you like this length. Thank you so much to Aura for sponsoring this video, and thank you also to my Patreon subscribers, a few of whose names you can see on the screen right now. Patreon's a fantastic way to help support me financially. You get a couple extra videos a month, behind the scenes looks, previews, things like that. Thank you so much to everybody who has supported me on the Patreon, through the YouTube channel memberships, by super chatting me, by sending me one-off donations on live streams. All of that is such an incredible help, and I really, really appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Happy Pride. I love you very much, and I'll be back soon. Bye-bye.